Greetings, friends. Today, I'm going to tell you about Marco, a barista from Rome. He's not just a man who makes coffee. He's a missionary, a guardian of the sacred ritual known as espresso. For him, the ideal world consists of the hum of an espresso machine, a heavy porcelain cup, and a 30-second conversation with the barista at the counter. And so this man, convinced that America is a coffee wasteland, arrives on an exchange program in the very heart of the beast, New York City. On his first morning, walking the streets of Manhattan, he sees a young woman in a business suit drinking what the locals call coffee from a cardboard bucket. At that moment, it's not just an internship that begins for Marco. It's an existential crisis. This isn't a story about the taste of Arabica beans. It's a story about how the American approach to life, to time, and to ambition can completely destroy your old beliefs. And what Marco will come to understand by the end of his journey is a shot of pure, potent insight. To understand Marco's culture shock, you have to live one of his days in Rome. Coffee is not a drink, it's an event, or rather, a series of short events. The morning espresso at a bar on the way to work. Not sitting at a table, God forbid, but standing at the counter, al banco. It takes exactly 2 minutes. One sip of a scalding, concentrated flavor, a quick nod to the familiar barista, and you're back in the flow of life. Another shot after lunch to wake you up. Maybe one more later in the afternoon. Each cup is a period, a comma, an exclamation point in the sentence of the day. It's a moment of pause, of socialization, a quick reboot. The entire Italian coffee culture is built around the idea of stopping. Stop, drink, talk, move on. For Marco, American coffee to go wasn't just in bad taste. It was heresy. It was a mockery of the very idea of coffee, turning a sacred ritual into a utilitarian act of consuming a warm liquid. The first morning in Manhattan, Marco, horrified, scans the streets for the familiar bar sign. Instead, he sees the green sirens of Starbucks, the orange signs of Dunkin' Donuts. He steps inside and enters another world. Noise, a long line of people buried in their phones. A menu that looks more like a dessert list at a pastry shop. Veni mocha with caramel syrup and double whipped cream. Grande iced pumpkin spice latte. Where was just coffee? Where was espresso? He watches people receive gigantic, nearly 1-liter paper cups of liquid, which they drink through a plastic lid. They don't stop. They take these cups and leave. Into the subway, into taxis, just down the street. They drink on the move. Coffee was no longer a pause, it was a background. An accessory for movement. Marco ordered the simplest filter coffee he could and took a sip. It wasn't a concentrated revelation like espresso. It was a diluted, monotonous flavor designed for long, mindless sipping. He felt like an archaeologist who had found the remains of a great civilization turned into cheap costume jewelry. But as the days went by, Marco, working as a consultant at a local coffee shop, began to observe. He didn't just see people with coffee. He saw patterns. There was the analyst who bursts into the shop at 7 a.m. Her enormous cup of black coffee isn't for enjoyment. It's fuel for a 2-hour commute on the train, where she's editing a presentation for the board of directors on her laptop. There was the construction worker who gets the largest cup with milk and sugar. That cup will sit beside him on the construction site, keeping him warm and energized through 4 hours of hard physical labor. There was the student, sitting in the corner with his iced latte for the 3rd hour, having turned the coffee shop into his own free office. And it began to dawn on Marco. American coffee isn't about taste. It's about function. It's not about ritual. It's about efficiency. Italian espresso makes you stop. American coffee is designed so that you don't have to stop. Ever. The final epiphany hit him when he witnessed a particular scene. His boss, an energetic woman named Kate, was preparing for an important meeting. They were running late. There was no question of stopping at a coffee shop. Instead, Kate, without breaking her stride, opened an app on her phone, tapped 2 buttons, and said, "Done. We'll pick it up in a block." As they walked past the coffee shop, a barista was already waiting at the door with 2 labeled cups. They didn't go inside. They didn't stop for a single second. They just grabbed their fuel and rushed on. In the taxi on the way to the meeting, Kate made 3 calls, answered a dozen emails, and finished her coffee in the process. And Marco, holding his own warm cup, understood everything. The paper cup isn't a sign of poor taste, it's a brilliant invention for a life in constant motion. The enormous volume isn't greed, it's a calculation. This charge has to last for the entire sprint. This wasn't the degradation of coffee culture. It was its evolution. An adaptation for a world where every minute counts, where ambition and speed decide everything. Marco left New York, and his world was no longer black and white. He understood that the two coffee cultures are answers to two completely different questions. Italian espresso answers the question, how can I find a moment of pleasure and pause in my day? This is the philosophy of being. American filter coffee answers the question, how can I squeeze the maximum energy and productivity out of my day? This is the philosophy of doing. And neither answer is wrong. They are simply for different civilizations. The Italian ritual is beautiful for a world that values tradition and a measured pace. The American model is the perfect tool for a nation built on movement, ambition, and the unbreakable belief that you can achieve anything as long as you don't stop. And in that quest, coffee is your most loyal ally. So what's more important? A moment of pure, concentrated pleasure or hours of uninterrupted energy to achieve a goal? Is coffee a ritual for the soul or fuel for ambition? Share your opinion in the comments, because this debate is timeless. And of course, subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next dive into the surprising American reality.